Hello, and welcome back to our HackerCon. Our next speaker is Amélie Koran, and she's going to be talking about seeking the upside. Take it away, Amélie.
Hi, welcome to my talk, Seeking the Upside. So, let's get here. My scroller for my notes aren't working here. So, this is my required corporate forward-looking statements slide. You get to read it for about 10 seconds. If I don't share it, they won't offer up other chances for me to speak. So, this is my attempt at some level of compliance. So, like, woohoo. All right, next. Went too far. So, hey, it's me, Amelie. Some of you may know me by my handle online, WebJedi. I'm probably most likely making a mess of things on Twitter, but my website URL is webjedi.net, so say I've possibly branded myself correctly is kind of an understatement. Just don't ask me about my tattoo of my avatar that I've used for the last 25 years. I got last year before a talk at ShmooCon. I really don't advise that as a way to lower your anxiety in exchange for some pain. So, why are you here? Why am I here? What we're going to talk about, how we're going to solve the problem, what you can take away from this talk, and how to pay it forward. Pretty standard. We're here to talk about an issue, maybe complain a bit, figure out if we can fix it. If we can, here are some ways, otherwise inspire you to find a way. Pretty standard talk stuff. I figured I honestly wouldn't lie to you. So I'm a senior technology advocate in the research and advocacy team here at Splunk. Prior to that, well, let's just say I kind of took a very circuitous and long route to get here. I spent a decade in public service at several agencies. Just prior to Splunk, I left federal service as a chief technology officer for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of the Inspector General, tongue tie, and spent some time at a few cabinet level agencies. This included a leadership development rotation at the White House at the Office of Management Budget, where I worked and led for a short time the Open Data Initiative, helped boot up the U.S. Digital Service, and was lead for review for all the markup of the cybersecurity legislation in 2014. Do not blame me for FISMA, please. Private sector-wise, as you can see, I've had the pleasure of supporting multiple industry sectors, including critical infrastructure, entertainment, and even some nonprofits and startups. It's been a fun ride, but most of all, I've often been there at the right time for some of the most challenging experiences, including natural disasters, major security incidents, or around during their own business transformations. Now, touching on the part-time hacker and serial volunteer parts, I regularly take part in local security conferences as staff, including B-Sides in the DC area and being a DEF CON goon, and was most recently added as staff for the Diana Initiative. So, to be honest, it's always good to give back to a career that's helped deliver on some of my own dreams. So, you're wondering, like seeking the upside, like what the absolute heck does that mean? Well, I pitch this from the perspective of somebody who's had a very long tail in tech and security communities and will, have a bit of perspective about all of this in the public sector as well. Now, this is given the recent reporting regarding the role of DHS, CISA, and Congress for trying to help fix some of the endemic problems that we have. Now, I'm not talking strictly about the public sector, but have it as an example, and I've also been in the private sector and academia. However, a lot of the same issues tend to exist. They're just exacerbated and easier to track with the public sector examples. And this kind of feels like there's no upside. I mean, how many of you actually feel a little down and out having to navigate through this career and community? Secondarily, how does it feel that the federal government is actually helping? Now, the former I can spin on here a little bit and we'll cover. The latter will be scoped around this, namely what lessons can we learn from how our leaders are talking about their problems? How does this actually scope to the overall security landscape as a whole? So first off, I will confirm that our careers, industry, and community are rather unique. And I'm sure that there's some self-realization that if you started down this road 5, 10, 15 years or longer, you've experienced an awareness that folks not in this space are more aware to some of the things that we encounter each day. This could be your mom, your dad, your sister, brother, or a weird person down the street, or the barista at Starbucks. The number of folks who have heard about ransomware, hacks from nation states, and a host of other formerly highly wonky and very technical subjects has immeasurably increased. However, along with this, we've often seen an uptick of folks who are joining or want to actually join this career space. And, this has been bolstered by our own worst marketing, knowing that we pay folks better than their own pedestrian, technical-oriented counterparts like accountants, HR. Nothing against them. But that's a draw, even if all the skills desired by the marketplace don't exist in this wave of new folks. We've gotten better with developing the pipeline, focusing on diversity and some levels of equity, but they're still sort of the Wild West. In fact, hearing from a friend that they were offered $18 an hour for forensic work, my jaw just absolutely dropped. We have a far and wide chasm to cross with understanding the needs versus the supply of certain talents. That, and ensuring that it hasn't gotten to where it's viewed as a commodity, no matter how much recruiters may see it as such. So finally, the market itself realizes that they need these skills, as more and more traditionally non-tech centric business sectors are becoming increasingly digital in the way that they provide their own products and services. So the demand for talent will probably not shrink, but the challenges of mastering that transformation and operations has exponentially increased. So I spoke to this in a talk 2 years ago at ShmooCon and will refer to you to actually that. And then I will update that talk later this year at Usenic's LISA conference, which I just heard about on Thursday. So I'm really excited. So as we've seen over the past few weeks and months, there's been sort of a reckoning with leaders of various industries and sectors, as not just with the practitioners. They realized that it was surprisingly easy to get hit hard by vulnerabilities introduced in their technology infrastructure, usually by third parties. However, the world didn't actually end. It just put a lot of folks back on their heels and get to wondering about how they go about architecting, designing, implementing, and operating their systems. Now, if you're in a role where you have some sway in how your technology spend happens and are not thinking along these lines and hard about this, then you really need to question about your usefulness to your organization. What are you, if a practitioner or executive, to do about the first step to address the question? Now, in the federal government, we always had a challenge of money. But not in the traditional sense of the word. Definitely not through the answers the individuals from DHS gave during their various committee and subcommittee testifying. Now, the challenge actually arises when the money doesn't arrive properly within the time frame that you're required to use it. So there's usually like a 1 year or a certain period of time that money is actually allocated. The agencies are generally pretty good about that. With adhering to deadlines, the rest of the executive branch, including the Office of Management Budget, which is part of the executive office of the president, also deals with that. It's a cycle that's gone on for many, many years. In fact, we actually call it budget season. There's actually even a U.S. government-only term, kind of as a pre-holiday gift back to the agencies, called passback. This is actually when submitted agency budgets earlier in the year get handed back to the agencies from the White House so they can actually determine what was essentially approved of their request. But this is only one part of it. So besides that, that's just the alignment with the initiatives with the White House, and it doesn't actually reflect the realities of how the budget is actually apportioned by Congress. So this is your tax dollars. Congress, who has the power of the purse and actually divvies up the tax dollars through appropriations. That effectively tells agencies what kind of money they have to actually spend to get it all done. During perfect times, the budget would be approved well before the end of the fiscal year. In others, it's got a CR, or a continuing resolution, which gives Congress more time to do their work. It's like asking for an extension on your term paper. When there's an impasse, we get a government shutdown, and then everything grinds to a halt. This momentum switching or that hesitancy breeds risk aversion and can seriously derail efforts that could do good or set back good efforts that were already in motion because of potential restarts, removal, or replacement of resources such as their time, their staff, or their money. Those shifts in resources at the staffing level because of the frustrations or thoughts of greener pastures are also tied to missed deadlines and, kind of with the depleted or messed up resources. This is enough to create a rather vicious cycle. Keeping staff becomes harder and harder because it appears that many efforts end up being kind of like self-defeating, end up getting delayed or canceled or actually never completed fully. Cybersecurity in this space has become highly political, with questions being asked as to why things aren't effective even when money is spent on them, or more grandiose as promises are made and never actually materialize. The upside here is there's going to be room for improvement, but it will take actually a lot of work. Everyone's going to recognize this photo. So the world's full of problems. We've got tons of problems every day. So getting out of bed in the morning is a problem, but for different reasons for different people. And it's important to recognize that. So with all our problems in our world, how do we identify the upside and work towards it? This isn't a one and done type of activity or effort. Maintaining your posture, awareness, and operations in a secure fashion and addressing risk is an ongoing and iterative process. Often your challenge remains being, having it up top of mind, but not in such a way to actually be a specter that people fear or a force that kind of people actively avoid or try to ignore. This is one goal of organizations attempting to transition to, say, DevSecOps from prior development operation structures, and to not do performative inclusion of security and integration of security, but to actively make it part of the culture and transformation of an organization. Most of us walk in thinking there's a lot of debt to eliminate and tend to kind of point fingers solely at tech debt. Noting that things are, if they were patched or running the latest versions of software or hardware or internal code was actively maintained, would be totally fine. But often miss that forest for the trees, and there's a ton of other debt that actually affects us. Identifying this may also bring allies to your side, but also fix externalities that may be adversely affecting clearing of your ledger, like Black Widow or Hawkeye do in the Avengers, with other debt areas that you have maybe direct influence over. So one of these is process debt. Process debt it comes from the way that we always do things. Like this is the habitual aspects of that people and organizations do over time that actually exacerbate problems and create vulnerabilities. Kind of like think of it this way. So in those thrillers, where they attempt to scope a place out, say like Soderbergh's Ocean 11. They map out the process an organization does regularly and exploit the blind spots and the humdrum nature of how people go about doing their day. So they look for those parts that people just kind of it's habit. You get muscle memory, but with that you lose awareness. Sometimes there's just cruft that builds up over time and is never removed. If it was kind of like an ad hoc addition, like a process patch to a daily process, or somebody never spent the time to optimize how people do their work. But they just kind of keep adding and piling things onto it, not realizing it actually made it possibly more complex and thus more vulnerable. So, as a security person, you can sit with your business line partners in your organization to look at how they actually do their work and stop having them try to kind of like patch everything by throwing another piece of technology at it. So, like break it down on what their source material is and what their desired outcome and remove the discussion of like such and such a tool or technology and scope it to those desired outcomes. So like tell them to stop talking about SharePoint. This is not only personalized the security role to the business and to your other peers, but also aligns better with DevOps teams and moves you closer to that DevSecOps model through that culture change and the integration of security thinking and mindset into your organization. So like stop thinking like a checkbook is going to solve your systemic problems. In short, there's not enough shiny stuff or any shiny stuff that is an easy button to protect you or your organization from a well-motivated attacker or threat. Especially if you don't look at the problem, kind of holistically or completely. It's no one person's or one group's problem to solve in your organization. It's everybody's problem. You get over that and less of what you can go and, basically go and buy and what outstanding talent and thinking you can use to collaborate to solve problems and work towards that defense, detection, and reaction. That's your strength. Your superpower is using your brain and other people's brains to solve these problems. This is kind of like not groupthink, but just like the big brain. It's also making sure that the right people are using their brains in the right way. Focus on the areas of their expertise and communicating what they find and informing decisions and actions. But this is also apt for both attackers and defenders. Adopt that joint mindset. Hence, this is kind of where we get like that purple teaming. So most places seek to get to a point where they're compliant and not necessarily go over. This is often not enough resources planned or set aside to excel past the bare minimum, nor they actually have the appetite under fear that it may complicate or make things harder to do. This is just going to that waterline. This usually makes it for some attackers that if you've done the bare minimum in some areas, most likely it's the same methodology you followed elsewhere. This is their risk assessment of you, the risk of getting caught or detected. Your processes and policy debt end up contributing to your technology debt there, often through the lack of emphasis on configuration management, documentation, knowledge management, training, and other block and tackle non-technical basics being performed. Consider focusing on completing the basics of security before pushing for or allowing for the whiz-bang new stuff. And don't get distracted by the shiny new stuff and promises. This is probably more very likely for what vendors promise. Building a structure on a shaky foundation is eventually going to cause it to tumble. It may be boring, but it's easier to rely on making sure that it's done, and the rest should just come easier. So we often bemoan patch, but iron out and ensuring a system like that is reliable, trustable, and maintains the integrity of systems that rely upon it, allows their work to get completed in a more stable fashion. You don't need a gazillion-dollar budget to do all of this. You don't actually have to be the best at everything. You don't need a platinum-plated level of protection or gold-plated tools, but you do need to know how to operate what you have. Ensure that it actually works in a way that's advertised, predictable, or how you need it to work, and understandable for those that your team and those that are consuming the data can actually use. Finding this as an upside is actually really important because you'll feel less underwater when something actually bad happens because you've done your best with what you have, but also know what gaps you eventually need to fill. So, it's taking a punch, but it's not going to hurt as much. For executives, knowing what they have that works is also usually better than wondering if what they bought is the right stuff and if they paid too much for something that doesn't actually work. If your tools are detecting and alerting on what you've tested them on, and you've picked up verifiable things you weren't looking for or testing for, it's actually working too. But it's always a trust but verify model. And this is why, if you're doing vulnerability detection and stuff like that, so why use a couple different tools. As somebody who's actually nearly run every type of security program you can typically have in an organization, clearly communicating the right stuff to stakeholders, internal customers, executives is your RI, or your return on investment, because it effectively supports decision making and takes the load off you and your team to actually have to do everything. That vulnerability report that can be ingested into a tool to help with patching is actually really great. Say the results from a code audit to hand to the CTO, noting where the insecure methods are constantly being reused, that's useful. It's excellent because it's up to them to address it in their teams, not you. Clear, consumable, and understandable information is actually a force multiplier. You don't have to dumb it down, and that's condescending and rather passive aggressive. So to tell the truth, be direct and honest when you deliver your data, report, and other information. If things are bad, say they're bad, because if you don't, there's no chance of folks knowing it has to get actually better. Again, make it clear, make it actionable. Don't disguise what you mean, even if it's ugly, but try not to cover your ass, nor really get to humiliating anybody. Kind of find the balance of calling out or a fix or a change that can still be had without actually hurting somebody. This makes you kind of not building friends, but makes you less of an adversary when you kind of approach them with a problem. But maybe for like a stick in the mud type of person, there's always some of those. An occasional cajoling may be necessary. Now, if it's something big or something highly visible or important, you may only get one chance to make a difference. So say your piece, but don't flame out. So as we kind of close this out, and I'm hopefully making time here, what actionable things are you going to be able to do, no matter what your level, type of expertise, or the scope of influence may be. So as a community, we're often applauding the latest great hack or clever exploit and rarely celebrate the great saves. Share how it was done and help spread that info around that makes everybody's lives, but primarily blue team people's lives, easier and better. I've been on multiple ends of all this stuff, and celebrating those saves, like a great save in a soccer game, always a plus. This is akin to many managers and executives looking at their peer organizations, competitors or otherwise, and feeling a sense kind of like a loss or anger or envy because they got the press for something really spectacular or groundbreaking that they released. And all they have to deal with is that daily grind or the bad news or some other daily struggle. One thing that isn't often shared is there's a lot of those same failures, those grinds, those mistakes that occurred there. They're just using better PR. Unless compelled by laws, regulations, insider leaks, or other disclosures, you're never actually going to go and hear about the fuck-ups, the mistakes, the breaches, or other rabbit hole paths that they've gone down, to less than success. Mistakes and errors are rarely or almost never voluntarily disclosed. This is why you look at a 10K or a 10Q at the SEC, because lawyers are really good at hiding things. Like intellectual property, they're often very closely guarded, especially if it'll affect the financial standing of an organization. But much can be learned by sharing these failures, a shared knowledge, lessons learned, or even, like that herd inoculation to make the recovery from a major or similar incident a lot easier to come by, and advances forward can be made. This is looking at things like cyber NTSB. People worried about, now that we share all this information, the attackers will now pivot. But the idea is you end up building a lot more of those foundational quality controls into your defense, because more and more people are using them versus them being just in one spot. You may eventually drop some anchors through your hull, to use the picture from before, but the concepts of information sharing in this area follow the, kind of rising tide raises all boats with cyber defense and protection. And I say cyber non-ironically here, it's just what we use. We come to conferences like this, now more virtual than physical, pop in the security or hacker social media circles. You're on Discord, I'm on Twitter, people are on Facebook. We read research and other bit of writing or knowledge and acquire that. And it's just built into that community. It's built into our culture. It's built into, kind of the career. This is what we need to do. It's a day-to-day change that we try to bring in. Sadly, unfortunately, and me being a former exec, that value isn't often carried up into leadership and executive ranks. Trying to explain the value of a CTI, capture the flag, threat hunting, or similar processes to execs, you may get a lot of blank stares because often most businesses and organizations find communication to be carefully curated channel and control, and they use it as arbitrage almost. It's this kind of gaming the system. They say knowledge is power, and sharing that or communicating also exists in that sphere. I've been in many organizations where the actual shutdown of communication has created a massive amount of dysfunction, and the outcome was the OPM breach. So I knew about the failures of how bad communication can be, and when that happened, I was like, "Yep, that's why." So, what can be most effective, at least for leaders, to kind of help those who come to talks like this, conferences like this, or other events where tools, techniques, and strategies and other ideas are shared? It's to capitalize on that knowledge and fervor and provide spaces for folks to apply those like aha moments upon their return to their organizations to help solve their problems. One of the greatest disappointments I've had as an individual contributor was to return excited about hearing about something I could actually capitalize on and want to share it, build it, or use it, or whatever technique to fix things, and only to be stymied by the inability to share or actually activate it, getting other people to kind of bolt onto that fervor. If you're here as a presenter, and the previous talk here was amazing on like media training and not just a participant, you learned that knowledge is a tool to be shared, and it's best to take folks along for this ride. That ride can be enjoyable if you share it for both of you, the driver as well as the passengers. Unless if it's a heist movie, then maybe just kind of like for the audience. We get better from sharing that across industry sectors and between public and private sectors as well. Having been on both ends, I've seen the benefit from that, but there's also some pitfalls. This breaks down a lot of the silos that are set up to keep folks from being effective in their roles. And you can ensure that you're doing your best in your role by doing that sharing, even if leadership and management may not actually wanting to foster it in theirs. You maintain your view over what you have influence and control over, and should feel secure if others see your value. So I started saying that we had to find the upside, which is great and laudable, but for those who spend really, really long days doing incident response, forensics, and so forth, there feels like there's very little progress to be made, or decisions from which they have little to no control, running counter to their needs that are actually being made. It's definitely tough to be chipper or find that upside. Like Sam Wilson over there, if anyone's watching the series, he carries a burden of what's been entrusted to him by Captain America, trying to decide what he's actually going to do with that shield. It wasn't a straightforward decision. I watched episode 2 last night, still trying to figure it out. So we carry a burden of responsibility to use our skills and knowledge to the best of our ability in service of who pays our paychecks most often, which puts a roof over our head and food on the table. Now, I will not spoil some of what's being covered in that series, but for what I've seen so far, this is going to be a lot of aha moments for security professionals. So I actually used to work for Stan Lee, and he famously written the words for Spider-Man, another superhero: "With great power comes great responsibility." And that also leads to burdens at times. We can kind of change the fate of a lot of things if our skills, our power, aren't focused. Some in this field are fantastic at hacking policy. While not a technical pursuit, knowing how to do that ends up helping you if you're a technician, if you work together as a team. Don't look upon compliance people as the same way. There's a lot of stuff that they do could actually help you do your job better or easier. As a technical specialist who's good at what they do, you give the executive peace of mind that they have the talented team to protect the org that employs you. It's a support system, but realizing that you're often all better together, using your skills to the best of how you can actually apply them. Now, you'll have to probably pace yourself as burnout will strike. I know I've had it happen to me more than a few times, and that's using your power responsibly as well. There's always a change of pace and focus that can come from flipping teams, like red to blue, blue to red, purple team, what have you. There's also changing sectors, whether it be things like critical infrastructure, finance, etc., to going from public to private or private to public. I've done that a few times. A good organization knows the value of having diversity of experience on their team to help solve their problems. Secondarily, while this is kind of often horizontal, consider how leveling up to leadership, deciding, hiring the good people can actually make your job and your team better. It may kind of come with some non-perks like handling budgets, more planning, endless meetings, but even getting a taste of it kind of helps understand the value of what an outstanding leader may have done for you in the past. So, of course, it's also okay to stay on your path. If you want to stay technical or an individual contributor and you don't want to lead, that's totally fine. I've shifted that. It's worked. It's just a matter of what you want to do. I've done that. I did a talk on it. I enjoyed talking about it, but I do feel the tug of leadership again. I may go back at some point. I know it's strange, but it's a matter of finding your niche. But I would be remiss, at least finally, in not touching on the subject of hacktivism. I've seen a lot of higher profile items in the last year, things like the election, protest over social justice, some of the direct action there, mis and disinformation campaigns, and kind of like general issues with society, such as unbridled capitalism and corporate malfeasance. It was covered in a Reuters article yesterday by Joseph Men. While I don't condone all the stuff we've seen, what some of the outcomes have actually brought to light are some of the ugly underbellies of what goes on, that really makes the world kind of seem wretched at times. Here, sometimes sunshine proves to be a good disinfectant and brings the discussion of what we've let pass to light. This then has people who would normally kind of like tackle the issue, start talking about it, maybe try to do something good about it. In those cases, I'm kind of cheering for my own little corner. As an LGBTQ plus person in a same-sex marriage, married to somebody of a racial minority, which we both have our own disabilities and suffered things such as bullying and abuse growing up and even into adulthood, we get to wonder how effective some of that fringe work is and what power is used in non-traditional ways. One of the things I always kind of think about when I try to inspire somebody is a quote from Silverado. The world's what you make of it. If it doesn't fit, you make alterations. This is a chance for you to kind of help focus your skills, your talents, your interests to try to make the world better. It's okay to pivot. It's okay to feel frustrated, but there's always a chance to find that upside. So I hope this has proven to be like a short or at least an interesting ride. So thank you for joining me today and your time here on a Saturday afternoon, at least where I am. It could be still morning for you, but do take care and thank you. Everybody back?
We are here.
All right, cool.
Omar. Joseph.
Uh-oh.
Do we lose them?
I don't know.
Comcast outage?
Oh my God, I don't even want to hear Comcast right now.
Don't threaten me with a good time, right?
Oh man, no, I found out like about an hour before going on the conference was that the internet has been down in my area completely since 3 a.m. So I had to rush to my dad's place. I'm at my dad's place right now doing this.
This is why you get an unlimited data tethering
right?
phone.
Yeah. Oh God.
Do you want me to start sharing screen, Chloe? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Amy, how's it going?
Hi, good. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no,
I just wanted to make sure you guys are hearing me, you're seeing me, and if you're unable to share a screen, then I will set it up before we
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, let me stop the share. Sorry, my bad.
No problem.
Hopefully everybody got that.
It's good stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a great talk. Thank you.
All right, over to Discord. See y'all later.
All right, thank you again.
Thanks.